welcome to episode 323 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans' weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and it's February, and you know what that means. We're gonna get spooky. Now, I definitely have my national and or traditional holidays mixed up, but we are getting spooky in February because this episode is going to be about the Dark Pictures Anthology, Little Hope, a 2020 horror, Peter, is it fair to call it a horror puzzle adventure or a horror narrative adventure?
That is absolutely fair.
Right, well, thank you very much, my co-host Peter Triezenberg, for clarifying that for me.
Yes, you're welcome. I'm Peter Triezenberg. I have Fury on the socials.
We do those at the end of the episode on Retro, Peter. You've only done how many of these? Like 90?
Yeah, I know. I got into the habit of doing the I have Fury on the boards thing when we had forums.
Right.
And that is still sometimes a muscle memory that comes up.
Yeah, every time I speak to Rob Steinman in real life, I half expect him to say "Pale Robbie" on the boards right after he says his name.
Yeah, exactly. It just throws me off every time.
But Pale Robbie on the boards is not with us today. But a game that he is at least aware of is because I know that he is also a horror fan. The Dark Pictures Anthology, Little Hope, is game number 2 of the Dark Pictures Anthology sort of mini-series, which are annually released horror adventure games that typically come out around Halloween, and Little Hope was the 2020 one of those. And the Dark Pictures Anthology is made by Supermassive Games, which is a small to medium-sized studio that was mostly comprised of the same team that made Until Dawn several years ago. I want to say that was, maybe 2017 or 2018. Don't hold me to that.
I know Until Dawn was 2015, 2016, I want to say, because I was in college. I was in college still.
All right, so earlier than I assumed. But Until Dawn has a shared lineage with Little Hope for sure. And Until Dawn, you and I attempted to play that for the podcast a couple years ago, Peter, in 2019. And I only say attempted because I believe you finished it, and we were able to have a good discussion about it. But my version on my PS4 crashed hard, and I was unable to get past the first hour or so. But I think it was a problem with my disc of the game. Unlike that messy podcast 3 years ago, you and I played Little Hope together via asymmetrical online multiplayer over the course of about a week at the end of January.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I do remember that podcast, and it was quite a lot of fun. And one of the things about Until Dawn that was so interesting about its success is that people sort of jerry-rigged a multiplayer way to play that, where they would pass the controller back and forth when different characters popped up to make different decisions. And I think Supermassive Games caught on to that because they have since made shared story and movie night mode in the Dark Pictures games a built-in feature. So we were able to play this game online with asynchronous multiplayer, where each of us took control of different characters and made different decisions that affected the story. And it was a blast. These games are very fun cooperative experiences.
Yeah, and we can go into this a little bit more later, but I think I would not have as much fun with this game without the multiplayer, because part of it, rolling it back a little bit, part of why Until Dawn was such a surprising runaway success several years ago is because of the streaming community and people like watching it via stream and watching probably reaction videos to Until Dawn, because Until Dawn is basically a slasher movie style horror adventure.
Oh yeah, this thing was made for the YouTube Let's Player / Twitch streamer community, and I think I watched Markiplier's videos on it back in the day.
I didn't really watch. I don't know if this is scandalous or not. I don't watch a lot of streaming at all. I watch plenty of content on YouTube, but I'm not really but I don't really watch Let's Plays or follow any streamers, even though I'm friends with some streamers and sometimes just hop into their streams as a courtesy. But I don't really do a lot of video game streaming activity at all. But it was very easy to see how Until Dawn was an ideal experience for streaming. Kind of like watching a horror movie with a group at a buddy's place. Like, I think the experience is enhanced when you can sort of talk about it while you're watching it and react together with what's going on screen. So that kind of horror game, especially one that's not incredibly long, because like again, Until Dawn is probably 8 hours, and Little Hope is probably 5 hours. Like that is pretty much an ideal shared viewing experience. So Supermassive, or the group of people that eventually became Supermassive Games, like saw what worked with the community around Until Dawn, and made a very, very clear attempt to recreate that with Dark Pictures Anthology, and all of the Dark Pictures games, including Little Hope, having built-in options that, like you said, for online play and for movie night play, which I think is basically local multiplayer.
Yeah,
Like building it around those features makes all the sense in the world. And very recently, the most recent Dark Pictures game, remind me which one is it?
that's
House of Ashes.
yeah, House of Ashes.
Yeah, House of Ashes even has a mode where if one person buys the game, they can, it basically comes with a guest pass, so they can play online with one friend that doesn't even need to own the game, which is nice, because you and I both had to own Little Hope to play it together, which was fine. I don't think either of us were bothered by that. But having like extra accessibility for this multiplayer is really cool. I think we can agree.
Yeah, no, definitely. It is a really cool out of the box feature, and I'm really glad that it's something that they push so hard with these games. Whether or not they've recreated the success of Until Dawn is debatable. I don't have like hard data in front of me about streaming numbers or sales figures or anything like that. But thus far, at least, these games seem to have a respectable following. Um, and I think a big part of that is because of that community aspect. The fact that their people are able to jump in, play with their friends, or watch their favorite streamer go through it and make decisions and kind of try to influence that. It's just sort of built from that from the ground up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of these are quite as big as Until Dawn, because as
Yeah,
an outside observer, Until Dawn really, really caught fire
it did.
around when it came out, and none of these three successors really have. When
Yeah,
we should mention the Until Dawn is not part of the Dark Pictures series, because it had
yeah.
even though it's mostly the same team, it has a different publisher, and they're probably not allowed to call them in the same series. But there's a very
Hmm.
obvious lineage, both with the staff and how these games play.
Yes,
But
absolutely. A lot of the mechanics are very similar. Until Dawn was a Sony published game, and it had that first party Sony money to throw around. The three Dark Pictures games so far have been published by Bandai Namco. They're a little more restrictive with what they can throw around, but I still think they do a pretty good job with what they have.
yeah, and and Supermassive is, it's not a tiny studio. They have over 200 employees, and they're based in the UK. And these games look pretty good. So there is effort going into the motion capture and the visuals, and the smart elements of gameplay and
Hmm.
UI. This is not a tiny little engine that could indie studio.
Hmm.
There's some labor behind this.
For sure. Say they also go to the trouble of having at least one name actor in each one. Until Dawn back in the day had Rami Malek before he won his Oscar.
I think that might have even been before Mr. Robot. Like I don't know. I don't know how much they spend on big name actors, because it's,
Post,
there are a few, but I wouldn't call these games celebrity driven at all. Nothing like nothing like having Elliot Page and Willem Dafoe in that last David Cage game.
yeah, no, they're definitely like they put them on the box, for sure. But and they have interviews with them, but it's not like a major. The first Man of Medan had Sean Ashmore from X Men. Um, House of Ashes has Ashley Tisdale from Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, and
And High School Musical, how dare you?
High School Musical. I know.
Zac
And
Efron erasure, how dare you?
um, Ted Bundy erasure. Um, and Little Hope here has Will Poulter, who was as recently as that game came out had just been in Midsummer, the Black Mirror Bandersnatch episode, and from my childhood, the third Chronicles of Narnia movie.
God, the fact that you're having Voyage of the Dawn Treader be part of your childhood, it makes me feel very old, Peter. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
But I think I watched the first Narnia movie with my sister when I was in my early days of first being able to drive. I think we went to the movies together to watch that.
I
So,
was in fifth grade.
uh, but you know, those me watching movies with my sister ended up with her writing about movies for an entertainment magazine. So it you know, it's a circle of life.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
This is Little Hope, not Narnia, not Midsummer, not Mr. Robot, not any of these.
Although we do sort of have a an alternate world thing going on with the story, but we'll get into that later.
Yes, that's
Um,
true. They do not step through a wardrobe into a magical world of witches and lions, but witches are involved. Let's just go right into the narrative of these and stop talking about the situation around the game. Little Hope is a horror adventure game that starts out with a slightly grisly scene, or you know, not slightly, a very grisly scene of a family somewhere in New England in, I want to say, the 1980s, seemingly having a normal night in the house, but then a freak accident starts. The house catches fire, and four of the five residents of the house, actually no, five of the six residents of the house, perish horribly in that house fire. And with the only survivor being one of the teenage children living there. And that doesn't seem connected to the story at first, but it's very connected later.
yeah, no, and it definitely sets a tone going forward. Like, because all because I feel like all of these games have a little prologue section, Until Dawn included, that sort of sets the stage for the story, and usually it involves characters dying horribly.
So there's plenty of dying horribly in this game in general.
hmm but generally speaking, I don't think this moment caught me off guard because I don't think you're going into this expecting something so mundane as a house fire, but also just this is a shockingly grisly and also kind of sort of hits close to home, honestly. Like, oh yeah, well, God, this isn't some supernatural entity. This is like a horrible accident.
It doesn't seem supernatural, but there is one resident of the house, the youngest girl. Oh shoot, I know it's not
They
Mary.
call her Megan in the
Megan.
past
That's it.
section.
Yeah. Okay. So 80s is Megan. Listeners, that doesn't make sense. It will soon. I promise. So yeah.
hmm
Like Megan seems to have an imaginary friend or seeing things that the other people in the house aren't seeing. So there might be something off with Megan, one of the residents of the house in the 80s that dies. I don't. It might be the 70s, but I'm going to call that time period the 80s just so we have a clear division here. But then
Yeah.
after this house fire scene, fast forward to the let's say the 2010s, and there's a study group or maybe a small class going on a field trip on a bus, and it's the people on the field trip are five adults that basically correspond to five of the people from the house fire. They use the same image and voice acting performers between the two groups, and it's two middle-aged adults and three late teens early 20s adults, just like five everyone besides Megan in that house fire scene from the beginning. And so
hmm
this is the second period we're working with, and we're going to call that the present. So we have the 80s and the present with five characters corresponding between each other between the two periods. We're going to stick to the character names in the present because I will get so confused if I try to remember every single name in this, Peter. Uh,
Yeah, it's all good. I think we're skipping over something though. We got to talk about the best character in the game, don't we?
the curator. We are skipping over him, but we will get to him very soon. I
Okay,
promise.
for sure, for
Yes,
sure.
but so the five characters in the present are the professor John, who has the same voice performer as the dad. Then the middle-aged student Angela, corresponding to the mom, and then three younger people corresponding to the children from the house. Daniel, Taylor, and Andrew. Yeah, Andrew being the player character for most of the game. He's
Yeah,
probably
played by Poulter. Yeah.
yeah. If the game has a main character, it's Andrew. But you really sort of switch between all five characters. But yeah, between this prologue and the present day, with the eerie similarities between these five characters, we do go step into sort of a library room. Which is shared between the different Dark Pictures Anthology games and their mysterious guide slash narrator, the curator. who is just chewing scenery and being dark and weird, and is and sort of almost gives you a Persona 3 moment of your choice matters. These people's lives are in your hands kind of moment when he's lecturing you at the beginning.
Yeah, you can yeah, no, totally. Yeah, the curator, who's played by a British actor named Pip Torrens, is sort of a crypt keeper esque host of the Dark Pictures Anthology series, combined with Igor from the Velvet Room, and is just having the time of his life doing this. Like he's very fun, delivering a lot of, like, mysterious cryptic dialogue and hints if the player should so desire.
And in between each of the game's acts, which are, I don't know, maybe there's 4 or 5 of them, there will be sort of a break where it goes back to the curator and he comments on the choices you've made and what might happen in the next act, and it's just great every time. I always liked seeing him.
Hmm. He even and I didn't know this until we played together, but he even acknowledges returning players who've played the game before,
That's
and
right.
new players if you're doing a co-op run. He has different dialogue for co-op runs. So when we were playing, he was like, "Oh, I recognize one of you." And things like that, which I thought was really interesting. I think it's really neat that they went to the trouble of giving him like responses for those different scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, this game is nothing if not giving you different responses to different scenarios. Because again,
Hmm.
this was my first time playing and your second time playing, but a lot can change depending on choices you make and actions you take. Uh, to which degree different people lived and died between your first playthrough and our playthrough. I'm not making a mistake there, right? Like you had different end game death scenarios for
Oh
your
yeah,
runs.
yeah, totally. No, I've had I've gotten the run where everyone survives at the end, and I've gotten runs where all but one character died at the end.
And
Um,
spoiler alert: when you and I played together, we had more than one survivor, but fewer than 5 survivors. That's
yes.
damn sure.
Oh man.
But anyway, so you're on this bus in presumably the same New England area where the house fire took place, but your bus crashes, and the bus driver has disappeared, but the 5 people in the from the class or the study group survive, and their goal immediately becomes that let's find a place with a phone or a police station or something so we can get a ride out of here. And a lot of the game is just sort of wandering down a road looking for civilization. A surprising amount of the game is that, but
Hmm.
but at different points your characters will get separated so that you'll be in a group of 2 or 3 a lot of the time. And there will be, dialogue and interactions between the different characters. And for a lot of these scenarios, whether it's all 5 people together in one place or separated into small groups, you were controlling one person and I was controlling a different person, and we often didn't even see all of the decisions the other player was making. Like at one very early scene, you go into a tavern where there's just one sort of sad dude sitting there drinking alone, and I was controlling John, and you were controlling one of the teenagers, and like I had this conversation with him and with the guy at the bar and could take a drink or not, and could and the guy at the bar was reacting unusually, and I could hear your dialogue in the background faintly, and you were making decisions and stuff, but I didn't really know what was going on. We were
Hmm.
controlling individual character destinies without totally knowing what the other player was doing.
Yeah, and I think that's a really fun aspect of this game is the multiplayer is asynchronous, and they will often put you into the shoes of different characters and often have branching routes. There is a so some of the decisions, there will be points where the party splits up, because that's always a good idea to do in horror movies. Um, and during that time, you'll be in entirely different locations, and making different decisions that affect different players.
Yeah, we'll both be running or hiding from the same monster, and we'll have different action moments, which are basically quick time events, to get away from the monster. Just speaking very vague terms.
Hmm.
But it's totally asynchronous. You're playing the same game, but doing different actions, and the actions of both players contribute to the outcomes. And I don't know how many times they had to get these actors to record certain actions and dialogue because there are so many different ways things can go. Generally, when you're making a dialogue tree thing, you'll have 2 options, and each option will have a different tone or something. Like let's say
Mm-hmm.
Daniel is talking to Taylor and trying to get her to calm down and keep moving forward. One response might be comforting, and the other response might be aggressive, and like this. So it sort of labels every response with a tone that's referred to as a trait, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't tell the player this until the end of the game, I think, or if a character dies. But certain traits are considered normal, and certain traits are considered locked, and some normal traits are that are unusually good or cooperative are called positive. So, but if you make too many locked trait responses, basically the character gets unluckier and more negative, and those action moments will be more challenging. So if you have too many negative or bad responses and build up a bank of locked traits, the game will get harder.
Yeah, which is an interesting way of soft locking the difficulty. And they didn't actually add a straight up difficulty meter until House of Ashes, where they gave you like a bunch of different sensitivity options. Um, this time though, yeah, that's a really interesting way to go about it. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, I did have to do a little bit of research on this because they don't really tell you that explicitly in the game. But if a character dies, it will tell you how many locked traits they had. I noticed that the first time we had a character death, like even though I think it was Taylor, I think even though we did unlock some positive traits for her, she had too many locked traits, and one of us failed a quick time event, which caused her corresponding monster to kill her. Because again, these main characters sort of each have one monster that's hunting them that
Hmm.
corresponds to them. But we'll get into that in a second. But I thought that was really interesting because I was early on in the game. I sort of thought of the character Angela, the older woman, as sort of unpleasant. So I kind of deliberately had her respond rudely a couple times without realizing that I was basically digging her own grave.
Yeah, we basically this is getting ahead a bit, but yeah, out of nowhere, let's just say Angela did not make it through the night in Little Hope, and her death sort of caught both of us off guard because we thought we'd sort of cleared the conditions for her to survive. But I didn't realize we had these hidden stats to worry about.
Yeah, again, I wasn't surprised to learn that responding negatively made the QuickTime events more frequent or more challenging. That sort of makes sense to me, but it didn't happen that way for Angela. It turns out we passed her QuickTime events, like the parts where her monster was chasing her, but then at the very end of the game, evidently she had too many locked traits on her character sheet at the end game, which caused her to die unexpectedly at the end anyway.
Yeah, the more you know.
So yeah, if you're listeners, if you're playing this game and want everyone to survive, just have everyone respond as cooperatively and gently as possible, and then try to complete all of the quick time event mini games. And if you do both of those things, I think everyone will survive. But there might be a couple other decision points. Like there's one point where I think Andrew and Taylor are both being attacked by monsters, and you're controlling no, it's Daniel and Taylor are both being attacked by monsters, and you're controlling Andrew, and because Daniel has a knife, he can fend off the monster himself, and so Andrew has to rescue Taylor if you want all three of them to survive. There's moments like that.
And what's interesting about that is that's only if the player who is controlling them found the knife earlier, because there are hidden items in the game early. And I know like this, you at one point there's a point where you can find a gun.
Yeah, I was going to ask
Um,
you about this because I accidentally skipped the gun, but the gun doesn't necessarily help you. To tell yeah, tell us about the gun.
Yeah, so the thing is that so it's you're encouraged to find at least one weapon because it'll give you basically a free out against one of the monsters at some point. Like in the situation we were describing with Daniel and Taylor. However, there are also situations where having a weapon could actually be detrimental, and the gun is one of those moments because there is a scene where Angela gets separated from the party, and there is a scene where your party sees they're being hunted by the monsters and they see something ahead shrouded in the fog, and you do have the option of pulling the gun and it will do the little targeting reticle mini game that they do. If you shoot, you will kill Angela. And that is something that I find very interesting, is that sometimes they really play into, sometimes the best course of action is not to take an action. There are dialogue options where there is no good answer and it's better to stay silent. There are quick time events that it is better to not engage with because you'll accidentally hurt or kill somebody. Um, and whether or not you have the gun and fire at a certain NPC will actually drastically change the ending, and is actually, again, I won't get into specific spoilers, but it is the only way for one character to die at the end of the game.
Right. So all these interacting systems, you have decision making, like trying to reinforce good traits, and not lock in bad traits, having choose your own adventure moments with specific decisions, and thoroughly exploring different areas, and completing your quick time event mini games when you're being chased or grabbed by a monster. Like, there is a way to get everyone to survive with the best possible outcome, as long as you sort of do 90% of those things correctly. If you're playing this game specifically intending to save everyone, that is doable. And the game isn't terribly long. Again, it's about 5 hours. And so like, seeing different outcomes and different events by making different decisions is very possible. This game is replayable and probably and more fun in multiplayer, but it's there is a way to get to win with the best outcome, which again we did not do. But let's go back into the story a little bit. Uh, Shortly after going through Little Hope, you go through a museum area and a visitor center area for the town. The town is completely abandoned. The only other person you see, other than our five main characters, is that guy you meet at the bar, and four monsters. Um, and you learn that in this part of New England there were witch trials several hundred years ago. So now we're in the third time of the game. The let's call them the witch trials. So we have the house burning down in the 80s, the people on the bus in the present, and then the witch trials in the probably 1700s. I don't remember the exact date. Maybe late 1600s. But
Mm-hmm.
also, the story that's playing out in the past has people that look just like you in the present and the 80s, and they all share a name, share a letter at the first name. I know that like Andrew in the present was Anthony in the 80s, and Abraham in the witch trials. But and there's a situation like that for all five of the main characters.
I don't remember the exact names for all the characters, but Megan, the little girl from the 1980s, manifests as Mary, a little girl in the 1600s who was basically going around accusing people of witchcraft, and is sort of represented initially as an antagonistic force.
Right. It looks like that the ghost of Mary or similar is basically forcing the people in the present to watch flashbacks to the witch trials. And the people in the present, these flashbacks are shared. So usually two or three of them will be able to see the same scene from the witch trials every time you see one. And Mary is being manipulated by a priest who's definitely a bad guy, and she accuses four or five people of witchcraft, which ends up in that at least the first four of them all being executed horribly. I'm trying to remember. I'm going to use the names from the people in the present day. So the Angela analog is drowned. The Taylor analog is either burned or hanged, and which one of those happens depends on how the 1980s Taylor died in the house fire, because in our playthrough she got hanged accidentally. So in the witch trials, the 1600s Taylor was hanged. Then Daniel falls off a house and is impaled on fence posts or fence spikes, and then John is crushed under boulders, in a form of torture that I believe was real to the time.
Yeah, I was gonna say some of these deaths are screwed up and made even more screwed up by the fact that a lot of them actually are fairly historically accurate. We used to do some pretty screwed up things to people.
Yeah, and it's not lost on the player that those four deaths are similar to how the four people died in the house fire in the 80s, and it's not lost on the characters that these people from the 1600s resemble them, and they're all a little bit freaked out by it.
Yeah, and the monsters seem to be coming after them in the order of the flashbacks. Angela's monster starts making an earnest appearance after we see her double in the past get killed.
Yeah, and basically these happen one by one with first Angela's monster, then Taylor's and Daniel's around the same time, and then John after the first three. But the and it looks like that the monsters are the corpses of the people from the witch trials. Like they like God, the one that was maybe the creepiest to me was probably Taylor's, because she was hanged. She's like floats above the ground but dragging her toes a little bit with this really uncomfortable dragging sound, and with her neck bent at an odd angle. And when she attacks Taylor, it's with a long tongue trying to strangle Taylor. All of that
Hmm.
was way too creepy for me. And the death scenes, of which we saw a couple, are really grisly. I don't want to go into details about any
Yeah,
of them really, but I don't want to pick a favorite or least favorite because they're
yeah.
just
John. Yeah, no, they are definitely they are very well animated and very gruesome. John's monster is probably the one that freaks me out the most because it has these kind of herky jerky Jacob's ladder movements because its body's all bent out of shape from being crushed. So it sort of scuttles on the ground like a spider and then just moves up to the player way too fast.
And
Um,
I didn't see this, but you told me, and then I confirmed it later that Taylor's monster is totally different if she burns in the house instead of accidentally breaks her neck. They had to animate not only a hanged woman monster but a burning woman monster, and that so they like that's a surprising level of attention to detail. They they could have gotten away with just having one monster for Taylor, but they gave you two, and that's impressive and also grisly because that means they had to animate an extra a death scene and an extra monster, and that's a non-trivial amount of animation.
Yeah, no, they definitely put the effort in for sure, and I appreciate that. In general, the creature design in this game is excellent, and you can tell they put a lot of thought and care into making sure they lined up with the story, kind of have that Silent Hill esque symbolism going. This game really wants to be Silent Hill.
Yes.
Um, like that is not an unfair comparison to make.
The 2000s horror game influence is so strong here, especially since there's there's flashlight driven gameplay that's a little bit like oh shoot, what's the I'm blanking, but there are a number of flash.
Amnesia, like amnesia, or like something like just about every modern horror game
Yeah,
has like
I
that
was
sort of.
thinking of like the flashlight in Amnesia or the camera in Fatal Frame. These are people that have a deep appreciation for both horror films and horror games of the 21st century. Like there's a lot of influence there here, and I think there was a rumor that that Supermassive pitched to Konami their idea for a Silent Hill game that was rejected. So these people openly want to make a Silent Hill game, but instead are making these.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally fair if Konami's not going to do it. Grouse, grouse.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Konami's not in the business of making games anymore, which is I think I've said on podcasts many times in 2022
unless,
already.
unless they are terrible Switch exclusive Yu-Gi-Oh games or pretty decent Yu-Gi-Oh card game simulators. But I was gonna say all three of the Dark Pictures games wear their horror movie influences on their sleeve. Man of Medan is very heavily influenced by Ghost Ship, and House of Ashes is a mix-up of The Descent and Aliens. Which yeah, so wear those influences on your sleeve, guys.
But I would say Little Hope, especially because it's in a mysterious, foggy, small town with with monsters around, is the most Silent Hill of the three so far. I think is fair to say, even though I'm not the biggest Silent Hill player.
Yeah, no, they definitely are, and I actually really like one thing that they do here is because of course your characters are shrouded in the fog. One of the story mechanics of Silent Hill is that the town doesn't let you leave. Um, and in Little Hope, they do actually sort of gamify it, where they make a big to do about how the characters will walk into the fog, and then they'll wind up walking right back to where they came from because of some supernatural force. But if you turn around and walk into the fog, it will actually cause your character to keep walking forward until they wind up back at the point where they came, and that is really cool. That's a little detail.
This freaks out the characters in the game when they discover this pretty early on. And after they get the first couple flashbacks and the first couple monster scenes, they sort of figure that they need to solve the mystery of the witch trial and keep going into deeper into the town until they figure things out. And depending on on your actions and your dialogue choices, the characters can be more or less agreeing with that, or more or less like dissolving into panic and despair. but,
Yeah.
but in general, they get the idea to keep moving forward, keep running from the monsters to figure out what's going on. And eventually they learn more about the witch trials. You get more flashbacks. You're eventually chased by four monsters. There's a scene where Andrew has to choose between saving Daniel or Taylor, and the only way to get all three of them to survive is to choose Taylor, have Daniel fight off the monster with the knife, and both players successfully complete every quick time event.
You actually have, not to interrupt because you are correct, but I think you actually can give Taylor the knife
Oh,
if you make the other dialogue option in that thing. So it is possible for that to change if you're not paying attention to who is controlling who, to who has the knife at that point. You could inadvertently screw yourself.
maybe. And again, listeners, don't take what Peter and I are saying as 100% true to a game facts guide or something, because again, we did not get the best outcome here, and
We are but casual observers, but I do think that does make a difference.
there's a sequence of events like that, and this happened to us twice, where we thought we were in the clear, but then a monster attacked again, and we made a mistake and ended up losing a character. This happened.
Hmm.
I forget which one of us killed which character, but
Oh, I
both of
killed Taylor.
okay, yeah. You made a mistake in Taylor's mini games and she died, and then a little bit later in the basement of the factory area, I made a mistake and killed Daniel. So, and I think we probably had a mix of good and bad traits going into Taylor and Daniel by this time. So that we were probably doing those mini games on medium difficulty, but it was not enough to save them. So yeah, Taylor got her neck broken and Daniel got stabbed by their corresponding monsters. But before we got to the area at the end, but we did okay at the end. We did have John survive and escape the monster chasing him, and then and the final area of the game was Andrew, John, and Angela exploring the burned out house that was destroyed in the 1980s.
Yeah, for sure. And this is the point of the game where the two timelines sort of converge because throughout the witch trial scenes, um, all the characters are definitely accusing all the victims believe that Mary is responsible for their troubles. That Mary is the one going around accusing people of witchcraft. She's the little creepy ghost girl that jump scares you constantly. So the game is sort of conditioning players to think that Mary is responsible for it. But as the curator points out, if you push him for hints, is only a child. Mary is being abused by the priest in the past, and is sort of lashing out and accusing people of these trials because she is scared and confused, and honestly deeply regrets what happens to the people. So during the end of the game, you are presented with sort of a final series of choices where you have to sort of pin it on the priest. You're basically guiding Andrew's double from the past through a series of dialogue options to try and convince the court that no, Mary is actually innocent, Carver's the villain, which can have a number of different outcomes that affect both the past and the present characters.
Right, and as we were playing the game, the feeling I was getting, which is I don't know, maybe it's the intended one, maybe it's not, is that these monsters are the victims of the witch trial. The ghost of Mary is trying to direct the player to the truth, so they can learn that Carver, the priest Carver, is the villain, not Mary. The maybe to bring justice to Mary and so the monsters realize who truly killed them. And I also thought maybe because the monsters were going after their corresponding doubles, that maybe they were trying to kill their double so their double could replace them. Like maybe Andrew's monster could finally go to rest if he killed Andrew the same way he died. Like I was thinking, yeah, I was trying to make connections like that. But I think the intention was it's the ghost of Mary trying to teach the modern day characters about what really happened in the witch trials. Like it's a combination of those forces at work here. But in the final area, where we only had 3 of the 5 survivors, the game tells you that it's not over yet, because if you look out certain windows or explore certain areas, you see the monsters of the surviving characters hanging out. Like if you look out a window as Angela, she'll look out the window and then go back into the house, but then the player will see Angela's drowned woman monster stalking her, sort of. So like
Mm-hmm.
the game tells you that the monsters are still around, even though you think the danger has passed, or the main characters in the house in the present day think the danger has passed. And that final dialogue situation that you described, I think only can happen if Andrew has enough good traits and you make the right decisions to accuse Priest Carver instead of accusing Mary in the final
Mm-hmm.
flashback.
Yeah, no, definitely, and there are also options where you can. Mary does have a death animation if you accuse if you try to pin it on her, and she will get burned as a witch, which is definitely the worst outcome. I've seen another outcome where don't you save Mary, but you don't really successfully pin it on Carver, and the whole building goes up in flames, so everyone in the past burns to death. There's definitely a few different variations of that.
And we managed to get the good variation. Like we did. We had Andrew's decisions be mostly good ones. We talked to the judge and said, "Hey, hey, we think it's the priest. We think he's abusing her." And then the judge sees satanic markings on the priest's book. So like we successfully pinned the witch trial murders on the priest. So we got at least one good outcome in
Mm-hmm.
for our endgame scenario. But then uh, basically it goes back to the house and dawn breaks, and all 3 people that we had surviving, Angela, John, and Andrew.
Oh, we didn't have Angela
No,
survive.
I'm getting there. Like we thought we were in the clear, and they relaxed and stepped out of the house. But then Angela's monster like dragged her, and we got her kill animation horribly, which was when we realized that,
Yeah.
oh, we made Angela too unpleasant earlier in the game, so she had too many bad traits and didn't make it to the end.
Mm-hmm.
But because we had a good outcome with the final decision, Andrew survived, and because we had both good traits and good mini games for John, he survived. So we ended up with only 2 survivors out of 5,
Mm-hmm.
Andrew and John. And then the twist ending happens. And before we talk about that in detail, and I'll have you go over that, Peter, I knew about
Mm-hmm.
this game having a final twist from it being discussed in podcasts from like Game of the Year 2020 stuff over a year ago. And my memory of that wasn't perfect. Like what I knew about this game going in was the bus driver is alive and is behind everything. Was what I remembered from hearing discussions about this game, but that's not exactly true. Peter, tell me the twist ending that happens right after everyone steps out of the house and is determined to be safe, which for us was
Mm-hmm.
just Andrew and John, but can be between 1 and 5 people.
So throughout the game, the party is looking for their missing bus driver, who mysteriously vanished after the bus crashed. As the game progresses, you'll encounter the NPC who's drinking alone at the bar, Vince, who is reacting strangely to a lot of your dialogue options. And the twist ending, you discover that Andrew, the main character, is the bus driver. And the bus driver slash Andrew is actually Anthony, the teenager from the 1980s and the sole survivor of the house fire.
And at this reveal, it sort of zooms in on Andrew, but he's not a 20-year-old kid anymore. He's a man in his 40s.
Man in his 40s, and the other characters in the party vanish. Because what is actually happening is that he took a bump on the head during the bus crash. The other characters are manifestations of his dead family, combined with the sort of history of the town he grew up in, recreating essentially the trauma he went through, and his survivor's guilt, getting to save Mary is actually him trying to make up for the fact that he couldn't save his little sister Megan in the house fire, who, if you read between the lines in the story, was also being abused by a priest and was acting out, and everyone was all concerned about her, but it wasn't her fault. She was acting the way that she did. She's a scared little kid who doesn't know better. This and all the monsters, all of that, are actually representations of the way that the family died in the 80s. This ending is very controversial, really, and whether or not it cheapens the experience that came before. Personally speaking, I actually kind of like this twist. I think playing through the game again and looking at all the details and clues that they set up, as well as there's definitely a theme of literal ghost towns in this game. You end up finding a lot of information about like factories that shut down and economic situations that cause people to leave, and how this town is literally abandoned and forgotten, even though for a lot of people it was where their lives were destroyed. And I think that those themes, combined with the themes of survivor's guilt and trauma, make this, I think, a more emotional story than I was expecting going in. Um, so personally speaking, I was actually kind of a fan of the ending, and this is the point where I should point out that if you found the gun and you made enough negative traits, that is the only way for Andrew slash Anthony to die at the end, is they will just straight up shoot themselves.
Yeah, but we avoided that because I think we basically made good decisions with Andrew.
Mm-hmm. It's possible for you to shoot at Vince and for him to become very antagonistic towards you.
Yeah, I think in our playthrough, Vince was a little confused by us and maybe a little bit felt sorry for us, but he didn't act horribly to us. But I think with different dialogue decisions, that is possible. And in general, I think what happened was because Anthony slash Andrew grew up in Little Hope, he knew about the town's witch trials. So I think that the witch trials themselves did happen in the world in this game, but the
Mm-hmm.
specific flashbacks and everyone resembling his family was definitely a product of Andrew's mind, or Anthony's
Yeah.
mind. So it's like him knowing about the witch trials and his family dying and him hallucinating most of the events of the game is sort of all part of the same concoction, and it is not, and instead of it all being fictional or all being real, but there are no, but the monsters attacking you were completely figments of Anthony's imagination. And in the moment, I thought that actually I didn't mind the twist, and basically like the idea of these monsters and this harrowing ordeal being a man like struggling with his guilt and confronting his trauma, and with the implication that if you save everyone and the final outcome of the game is as positive as possible, of him really getting over it. But in this in our scenario, he basically saved his father and no one else. But the after thinking about it, I do think maybe not as negatively as the community, but I did think that it was cheapened a little bit. Like
Yeah, that's fair.
I was a little bit invested in fending away the monsters and learning about the witch trial, and not necessarily changing history, because I mean, even though the hallucinations from the past do see you interacting with them and handle it with, probably more grace under pressure than I would assume from of someone from the 1600s. But like I was a little bit invested in solving that mystery and pinning it on the priest instead of Mary. Like I thought that was a pretty good conceit for a horror game or a horror story, and the fact that none of it was real felt less fun or interesting to me than there actually being some kind of supernatural force present. And I should mention, Peter,
Hmm.
I really enjoyed playing this with you. I did. I was, you heard me commenting the whole time, uh, about like me liking or disliking certain characters, remarking that the character actor for Daniel in the game kind of resembles me, and that's a little eerie.
Yeah,
Um,
it was sending me the whole time.
and the thing is, most of the time Daniel is wearing a red polo shirt, and no, not joking at all, own at least two red polo shirts that look almost just like that. And like talking through it together and playing it together, I had a genuinely good time with this game, and made me interested in the other games in the series. And I really think I'm going to go back and try to fix my copy of Until Dawn and play that. But also, I almost never play horror games or even watch horror films. You know what I like to do more than watch horror films, Peter? I like going into Wikipedia and reading synopses of war horror films so I get all the fun of the twist without having to sit through a horror film, because part of it is that I'm a giant baby and genuinely don't like being scared intentionally, but also I appreciate that horror movies, I guess games also, but films more specifically, can take really weird risks and make wild choices that would not make sense in any other genre. So I appreciate that, but I would rather just read a horror movie synopsis than actually watch one, which maybe indicates how few horror video games I've played. It's a very short number, and an even shorter number that I've actually finished. But because this game had multiplayer, and we could and the way it was structured, I basically there was challenge and a fight to survive without being chased by zombies with two bullets in your gun kind of vibe. Like that's not an experience I seek out. Because of the kind of game this was, and because it had multiplayer and we could play it together, I did enjoy this, and it was not a chore to go from start to finish on this one. But that's not the case with me in horror games in general. So I appreciate you
Mhm.
doing this with me, and I'm glad we at least got to have one player survive, one at least one out of the five survive. I would have been a little bummed if everyone died.
Yeah, for sure. It's and yeah, I think I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I'm glad you had that experience because I really enjoy playing it too. I think in general, I do like horror movies a lot and horror media, although I'm not super big on like survival horror games because I'm not very action oriented a lot of the time. What but in term but a lot of that, especially with horror films, I think is always best experienced with other people. Um, because you get that sort of communal experience. It sort of deflects some of the tension. I like watching movies. Like I went to like the midnight release for Jordan Peele's Us, and that was one of the most fun movie experiences I've had in my life because everyone who is there is on the same page. Um, and that and that's one of those things where like I think the conceit of these games having these built-in multiplayer features is brilliant because it helps you recreate that sort of midnight horror movie showing experience with a buddy.
Yeah, and I guess I should also mention probably my favorite horror movie experience I've ever had in my entire life was when I watched Get Out with some friends,
Uh
and
huh.
in the theater, people were like were yelling at the main characters, "Do this, don't do that, don't trust her." They were agreeing with every single thing Rod said.
Mm-hmm.
Rod is his best friend on the
Yeah,
phone.
yeah,
Yeah, like and like being part of that crowd, like reacting at the right moments, and and basically supporting the audience insert character was about as the
yeah.
best
Mm-hmm.
way I could imagine to experience that movie, which is a great movie. But
Yeah.
like recreating that kind of horror movie experience with a game that is very very inspired by classic horror movies and games is ideal. And I don't think this game is a 10 out of 10. It is again, it's only but it's very digestible. It's only 5 hours, and they make it, at least for the past 2 years, they've released one of these every year around Halloween. And I think it's just a great time to get this game and play it with friends, or to get the new version, the new Dark Pictures game every year, and play it with friends and just sort of experience together. That is a fun experience, even though this is not necessarily making me go out and buy every single horror game like it. It had me pick up Man of Medan on sale, and make me pledge to try Until Dawn again, and that's about it.
Hey, no, that's totally fair, and I mean, like those games are excellent, and so yeah, and I'll definitely, if you're down to play Man of Medan sometime, I'll definitely re-download that at some point. I'm very curious about the next game in this series, The Devil in Me, the which I'll probably be reviewing for the site. Just throwing that out there because I've reviewed the other three, so continuity is nice. But the what's they are pitching the Dark Pictures as 2 seasons of 4 games each. And I'll be curious to see if that second season ever materializes after this, because again, I don't really know sales figures or Twitch numbers or any of that stuff. Um, so it'll be just be curious to see whether or not whether they're going to have the same publisher for season 2, or if they're already started on it or what.
Yeah, I would like to know how successful these are, because if it is a money maker and doing well, I would find that encouraging, because again, this is not a kind of game I seek out a lot. I don't play very many horror things at all. I want this kind of game to exist so people that love these games will be able to play them, because
Hmm.
I can totally feel that. But this game is a 7 or 8 out of 10 that I think you would bump up a couple points with multiplayer. Is if I had to
Yeah,
reduce it to a statistic, which is always unfair, but is what people pay attention to the most anyway.
for sure.
The struggle of game review. Yeah,
The
I hope these games are good, and I hope they make another season, because it's a cool kind of game.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very cool concept, and I hope too. I don't know if this is part of the annual release thing they've been doing. I think House of Ashes was definitely more polished than the first two. But I have had some weird technical issues with the first two games in this series, and we even ran into an issue where in our multiplayer mode, where it just sort of hung on a loading screen after the final decision, because one of us had packet loss, like we lost connection for a second, which meant we had to like replay a small chunk of the game to get back to where we were.
Yeah, we had to replay one of the ending scenes a couple times, and we got there eventually. But these games aren't exactly like like Insomniac's Ratchet and Clank running like a Swiss watch all the time. Uh,
Hmm.
but 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 it ran well enough, and I think we only had the connection or technical hiccup the one time. So it's far from a deal breaker, but there are technical issues present, I think is fair.
Yeah, for sure.
But despite technical issues and despite my often aversion to horror, I had a great time with this, and it was really a great time talking to you about this game, Peter. Thank you so much for suggesting this episode idea, and then us executing on that idea. For I think it was only 2 sittings. We beat this basically in 2 weekends in January.
Yeah, for sure.
It was not time wasted at all. And listeners, I hope this podcast was not time wasted at all for you. Again, I don't want this episode to be almost as long as the game itself, so we're gonna call it a day for now. Thank you for listening to us share our experience of the Dark Pictures Anthology, Little Hope, with you. I hope this makes you slightly more interested in the game or other games in the series. That would be the best possible outcome for this story. But let's talk about the other stories we will be sharing for the next month and a half or so of Retro Encounter. Next week, we're doing our first episode on Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I am in the middle of that game right now. Maybe by the time this episode goes up, I'll be done. But I'm having a great time with 2003 BioWare, even though it is my BioWare experience only goes back as far as Jade Empire until now. So this is my first time playing Knights of the Old Republic. I'm having a good time. At least that first episode is going to be positively tinged. I can tell you right now. But the next 2 episodes of Retro Encounter will be about Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I think we can skip ahead to what we're playing in March. March Madness takes over the college basketball world every year, but here at RPG Fan, we are going to have some Metroidvania madness. We are playing 3 Metroidvania games in March. There will be a different panel for each episode. One episode on Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. That's the Vania part of Metroidvania. Then one episode on Super Metroid for the Metroid part of Metroidvania. That is a game that RPG Fan does not cover. But we thought if there was ever a time to play a Metroid game for the podcast, it would be during Metroidvania month. And for the third episode of Metroidvania month, we decided to choose between a couple indie Metroidvania games, because indie Metroidvania was a big trend of the 2010s, and we landed on Salt and Sanctuary. So we are going to play Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, Super Metroid, and Salt and Sanctuary in March, each of those games getting a dedicated episode. But listeners, if you want to talk to us about Metroidvania games or horror adventure games or any games at all that could be played on the podcast, the best way to reach out to us is to email retro@rpgfan.com. You can also follow RPG Fans message boards that are basically dead, our Facebook page, which is surprisingly poppin', and our Discord, Twitch channel, Twitter account, all of those equally poppin'. Please interact with RPG Fan however you choose. And you could also interact with us by listening to our other podcasts. There's Random Encounter every 2 weeks, usually Mondays, about randomness. Rhythm Encounter every other 2 weeks, usually Mondays, usually about RPG music. And also Phoenix Edge, currently on hiatus, but coming back in 2022, usually about RPGs and current current events. You can listen to those 3 podcasts or Retro Encounter on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, however you choose. Please leave feedback. We love feedback. We also love you feeding back to us. Is that that sounds weird? Giving us feedback individually. Peter, how can listeners find you?
As always, and as previously foreshadowed, you can find me at I Have Fury on Twitter. You can also email me, peterT@rpgfan.com.
And in a surprise twist that no one was expecting, you can also find me on Twitter. I am at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoker for Dogs other times. You can also find me on RPG Fans Discord as Monsoon Mike. So, Peter, I'm glad that the 2 of us survived to the end of the episode, even if my doppelganger didn't.
Yeah, it was a good experience. I'm glad. Thank you for having me.
And listeners, thank you. Good night and good luck.